Dave Prior. Welcome to the Reluctant Agilist. This morning I have Kate Kaiser here with me. Kate, thank you for taking time out of your morning.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
And you're up in Montreal and you work for Plank, and we're going to meet in person very soon in Austin for the
Yes.
Digital PM Summit. So I want to just really quickly highlight your session, which I'm going to have to look at the screen for. On Monday, October 14th at 10:30 a.m., you are leading a session called Leading with Confidence, Overcoming Fear as a Non-Technical Project Manager, which sparks all kinds of things for me. But before we get into that, would you mind giving like a quick rundown on your background for the folks that may not be familiar with you?
Yeah, no problem. So I have been working in and around projects for quite some time, 7 years now. I've been a project manager at Plank for 5, and before that, I was working as a solutions lead assistant in IT.
Okay.
And before that, I was a project coordinator with Rogers, building network and towers and making sure,
Wow.
yeah, and telecommunications. It was fun.
Okay. Well, so you don't, I mean, if you say you're not technical, you come from a pretty hardcore background. When you learn what happens when you pick up a phone, your life changes permanently.
Definitely. I'm not technical, being that my education, I went to university and I studied English literature with a minor in history. So
Okay.
I'm not an engineer. I didn't go to engineering school. I don't have a business
Knock on wood for that.
background. Everything that I've learned has really been kind of my experience.
Okay. All right. And so one of the things that you said before we hit record was we talked about embracing fear. So would you mind kind of like giving a quick explanation of that? Because that's a pretty powerful phrase for folks.
Embracing fear, yeah. Um, I think fear is really important. I think
Okay.
when you face difficulty, when you face things that are hard, I find it's always so much harder when you have a negative mindset
Okay.
and things don't seem to move. You're not in flow. Everything is rigid.
Yeah.
And when you do the opposite and you lean into it and you embrace the challenge,
Okay.
for some reason, it's like a river, a dam breaking and a river flowing,
Yeah.
and you're just able to get to the end. And I feel like we build things up a lot in our minds.
Yeah.
Then when we get to the actual conversation or the situation,
Right.
it's never as bad as we thought it was going to
Okay.
be. So,
S- Okay. So I am closing the conference. I'm the closing keynote, and it's the first time I'm doing a closing keynote. So I will be standing up on that stage going, trying to remember this conversation when we're in Austin. But what are some things that you run into that trigger that for you, and how do you like self-talk yourself down off the ledge to being like, okay, just like, you know, Jocko Willink, the whole thing, be like, good, and lean into the fear.
emails are definitely something sometimes that I get that frozen moment where I'm like, oh gosh, how the heck am I going to answer this person?
Okay.
How are they going to receive what I need to tell them?
Right.
And not, have a heart attack on the other side of my email.
What kind of emails are you sending to people?
Well, that's just the thing. They're not supposed to be intense and they're not supposed to be hard, but sometimes you have to break a news, and
Like,
sometimes
hey,
it's
we're letting you go, like that kind of email,
no,
or
no. I do a lot of client work. So I do a
okay,
lot of conversation between clients. We are meeting once a week and touch points, but sometimes, they'll send me an email. They'll ask me the same thing the fifth time, and I have to not be frustrated and I have to not
okay,
let it get under my skin.
and stay on message with it, not give in to
Exactly.
them. Yeah.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And sometimes they'll send me an email, the goal of the project has changed, something has changed, and we got to act now. And after, 3 or 4 months of one thing being the goal, and then they're sending an email that, no, we need to change scope and we need to, veer off of the
Welcome to
ledge.
life at a digital agency. Yeah.
And like, that's where the fear comes from, where you're like, okay, I've got to, take this with an open heart and an open mind somehow.
Okay. So you're
And
you're you're afraid of reacting in the moment with because like I have to get up and like walk away. when I had, because I mean, I'm so like, why, you wait 6 weeks and then you're like, do it the thing now. And I'm like, I actually have other things I might have to do. Um,
Right.
and yeah, and that's where I just want to write these really pissy, angry emails back.
Yeah,
Only
exactly.
I'm not fear. I'm just angry.
Yes, I think angry, but also there's the fear. And for me, the fear comes from I've got to communicate how what they want is going to impact our timeline, our next
Okay.
milestones. I got to communicate the impacts of what they want to do. And my communication has to be such that it's not angry, it's not, you
Okay.
know,
You want
full.
to be really precise and effective, and you're putting pressure on yourself to be like a razor cutting through it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you have to have patience and the at the end of the day, like I said, I do client work and clients are going to client and they
I
are
love the way you said that. That's great.
yeah, and you got to help them as much
Help
as
them
you
help
could.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So you talk, when I look at the title of the talk, which I want to go back to and refresh on it, leading with confidence, overcoming fear as a non-technical project manager. Where I see that come up a lot when I teach a lot of Scrum Master and product owner classes. And I get people who are not technical. Their background does not include, I mean, any kind of development or technical stuff whatsoever. And they're very scared of being kind of called out by, you know, the all black wearing tech lead who talks to everyone like they're the village idiot. Um, how do you? But you've got enough in your background that you could probably like, pull out some intricate fact about a cell tower and just shut them down. But for people that don't have that engineering ish or technical like thing in their back pocket, how do you guide them through not getting trapped by the panic of, oh, they're gonna think I'm an idiot?
I first want to say, and this is my personal opinion, I think being a project manager, you have to be shameless. You have to have a
That's
degree
wonderful. Yeah.
of shamelessness because you
Okay.
have to embrace some of these uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
And if you have your ego or if you have your pride, it's not going to go well. So you kind of just have to embrace the moment and be a little bit shameless and
Okay.
ask the questions. Um, when I started at Plank, I did not have a web background. I had,
Okay.
cell tower background. So I had to do a lot
You're like the
of
nerd in
learning.
the room.
I had to do a lot of learning. And when
Okay.
I started, I had to, it was like a process of knowledge gathering and self teaching because I was learning web. I was asking all sorts of questions. I'm lucky that I also have done a business analyst
Okay. So you're used
training.
to asking questions and like everyone being like, come on. Like, I'm
Exactly.
just a business analyst. I have to know the answer. I used to do that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's super important though that you ask the questions because
Yeah.
for me, I always say, or I put myself in the mindset, I'm the champion of the client when the client's not in the room, and I'm the team's champion when
Mm-hmm.
the team's not in the room.
Yeah.
So if I'm not asking those questions, then I'm doing a disservice to both the client and the team because I can't go back to either of them
Yeah.
and really communicate what the information is because at the end of the day that's my job is to make sure that everybody knows what the scope is, what the goals are,
Mm-hmm.
and if I don't ask the questions then
Well,
the
I,
project's
I always assume other people have the question too, and they're afraid to ask it. And if you don't, like, it's just going to go unsaid, and everybody's going to be walking around with their assumptions,
exactly
which is
exactly
very painful. Okay.
very painful, very painful.
So, do you have like a quick checklist or anything? Like, I'm curious about when you catch yourself in that moment, because this is the thing I see happen with a lot of people and project managers too. You get to a point in your career where you figure out the thing that when like I am the one who's like and you're totally panicked and frozen and you realize that you're in like that rigid state that you talked about, you develop an ability to notice that and you have like this place inside you can go to where you're like, it's cool, I'm gonna figure this out, I'm just gonna do the thing and lean into being an idiot for a few minutes and get through it. um,
Exactly.
how do you, or what have you done to help yourself catch those moments, and like where do you go inside to like reset?
That's such a great question, and I feel like that's so hard to answer because you're asking me like, how do you become self-aware?
It's
And
not that hard.
we think it's not that hard, but it I find when it's kind of going back to those that banging your head against the wall, you have to have a little bit of self-awareness to say, "Oh, hey,
This
I've
hurts.
been thinking of this, or I've been
Mm-hmm.
trying to write this email for the last 25, 30 minutes. It's not really sounding right. I'm frustrated. I need to take a break. I need to get up. I
Yeah.
got to walk away. I got to change my intentions around what I'm doing because right now it is hitting hard."
Yeah.
So kind of have to be self-aware, and you have to I'm very time conscious, and I look at how long it's taking me to do something, and
Okay.
also how my energy is. I'm very in tune with my energy and what I'm bringing towards the table. If I'm going to come to a
Yeah.
meeting and I'm going to be grouchy, it's not going to be a great meeting. The
Okay.
same as if I'm writing any document or email and I'm grouchy or
Yeah.
I'm frustrated, my tone and my intention is not going to come off. So you have to kind of be reflective of like where your mindset is when you embark in some of these things.
Okay. So I want to go down this hallway for a second. Time is an awesome constraint because that's a really obvious thing we can all use. It's pretty concrete. Like, I've been writing this for 15 minutes. I've written one sentence. What's going on? Just checking it. Um, but the other thing, and I was just running into this last night. So being aware of your energy is good. Knowing like, hey, I'm not in the mental headspace to do this thing right now, also good. But most of us find ourselves every day with situations where you can be sitting there going, I am really not in a mental space for this conversation. And the other person's like, we're going to do this now. And your choices are like walk away. And that can be really bad for your client relationship, or family relationship, whatever. Or you walk into it knowing I'm not in a position of strength. I'm not in a position where I can speak clearly. How do you protect yourself and the other person in those moments? Because ultimately, it sounds like if you're fairly healthy about this stuff, you want to serve the client, you want to take care of yourself and your team. What do you do when you don't have an option?
I feel like there's always an option.
Okay. I mean, you could just like spill a cup of water on the table and be like, oh, sorry, got to cancel the meeting.
I'm very honest and I'm very transparent. And I
Okay.
think that's why a lot of my clients, I've built really great, strong relationships with them and also with my team.
Okay.
And there's never been a moment where I've been like, hey, maybe right now is not the time to have this conversation. Can we reschedule it for when we're all in the best headspace and that we
Okay.
can come to the conversation with some solutions rather
Mm-hmm.
than just hashing it out? I know for sure that I've asked clients, one of my clients not that long ago, we messed up, we fucked up, and they wanted to talk about it. And she's like, oh, should I just send you an email? And I'm like, hey, let's not hash this out over an
Yeah,
email.
let's actually
Let's
have the conversation.
let's have the conversation. Let's, you know, sit down and really go through it. And I was a bit dreading it. And then when I got to the conversation, they're really cool and they're super chill and they just want to learn from the mistakes that we've done and that they
Yeah.
can be a better partner and that we can have a better working relationship together.
Yeah, you strengthen the relationship through those conversations.
Exactly. And I think you strengthen the relationship by being honest and by being real and
Yeah.
saying, hey, right now, maybe not be the best time to have this conversation. I don't want to ignore what needs to happen, but can we have this conversation maybe next week or at the beginning of whatever day so that we're both fresh and we're both coming to it positively and hopefully you have a solution too in the interim. I when anytime I'm a big fan of Plan B.
Okay.
I Whenever I need to tell someone something, I
Yeah.
always have a plan B. Hey, this isn't working, but our plan B is this.
Okay.
Which I find always lands so much better than being like, oh shit, I fucked up and I don't
Yeah.
have another option
Whoopsie.
to
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you are literally the person that everyone is expecting to know where to go when the fire happens. Like they're all counting on the project manager to know that.
True, true. But one thing that I tell people starting out, you don't need to know everything. I feel like as project
You
managers,
can't.
we have all of this pressure on our shoulders of like, you have
Yeah.
to know everything. That's not your expertise. You're not a developer. You're not a designer. You're
Yeah.
not the client. Your expertise is keeping everybody on track, keeping people on time with the scope and the budget.
Yeah.
And if you need support because you don't know something, ask the expert. That's why they're on your team.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
you're
Take
working with
advantage of that.
exactly
Yeah.
leverage, the other smart people that you're around.
Okay.
Um,
So you mentioned something I want to, it's sort of a tip that I'm taking out of this. Um, I'm thinking with my clients, if I say to them up front, like, look, there might be a period where a moment, something that happens where I'm going to be like, hey, look, can we actually have this conversation later? And I could say that might be because I'm not in the right frame of mind to have that conversation, or it seems like maybe you're not. But I'm just going to ask you, can we hold on to that? I want you to know that I'm doing that with intention.
yeah.
And if they agree and they can do the same, then if one of you pulls that lever, then you can even call back to it and remind, like, hey, remember we talked about that, without having to give an explanation or without having somebody like force it through. That could be a really powerful tool to use to protect yourself and them in the situation.
And protect the relationship.
Yeah. Well, thank you for. I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to comment on one thing. So you've been doing this for 7 years. I've been doing it for almost 30,
Wow.
and that honesty that you mentioned, like the trust that you build, that is the thing that I think a lot of people don't think about in the beginning. And I learned it the hard way in the beginning. They don't remember the project, they remember you. The team members remember you, the client remembers you, and the relationship you build with them. And that integrity and that honesty is what sticks with people and makes them come back to you all the way down the line.
A
And it
thousand
can
percent.
backfire too. If you are not trustworthy, that can happen very badly as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And I will never forget when I was working at Rogers, one of my managers, the best advice he ever gave me, he said, make every experience or every interaction with you an experience, something that
oh wow.
you're going to remember. Make it positive.
I was going to say,
And
what if it's really bad?
no, but I remember that because I was like, yeah, it's an experience. Make it so that it's an experience working with me
Yeah.
because that people are going to want to work with you then, right?
Yeah.
They trust you. They're going to open up with you. If they feel good working with you, why wouldn't they continue doing
This is awesome.
it?
All right. So they can come to your session. They could sleep in. There's lots of things. They could go to Starbucks. Um, what's the pitch for what somebody's going to walk away from your session with? Like, what's the big win that they're going to get out of coming to this?
I really want to share my experiences so that other people can learn
Okay.
from my mistakes and learn what works for me and they can add things to their toolbox. And I really also want them to feel a sense of like they're not alone. People have fear. A lot of people have fear,
Yeah.
and it's normal and it's okay. And we got to lean into it and overcome because all of the challenges in our life just are there to make us stronger and better.
Yeah.
So I I hope that they come and leave with that.
I hope that they come with curiosity about their fear because it is trying to talk to you. Just none of us
Yeah.
want to listen because it's so scary. Well, this is great. What if people want to get in touch with you either before the conference or after? Like, what's the best way to reach out to you?
LinkedIn, definitely.
Okay, cool. Well, this was great. I appreciate you making time, and I can't wait to meet you in person.
Awesome. Yeah, me too.
Cool.
Austin is like right around the corner. Can't wait.
Yes, just a few weeks. Thanks.
Thank you.